From people to society to the natural world around us, here we're learning how Web3 can change the real world for the better. These speakers are ready to blow your mind. Say hello to Monika Bielskyte, the founder of PROTOPIA Futures. When we talk about extending reality to world outside the physical one, there are some obvious ethical conundrums that arise. Monika shares how we can remain conscious and human as we continue to explore physical and digital experiences.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to join y'all virtually for Meta Festival. During this talk, I will mostly use the term extended realities rather than the metaverse, as it implies the plurality of experiences and platforms at the increasingly porous boundary between our physical and digital experience of the world. But you could very much supplant my term with the metaverse, and my message would still retain its meaning. So let's go. Virtual, augmented, and mixed extended reality technologies will change so much of what we do today and many things that we struggle to even imagine yet. Fast forward a decade of breakthroughs in neuroscience, artificial intelligence, robotics, and a bleeding edge development of VR, AR, XR, and all the new ways it is set to affect how we might be processing and creating knowledge. But also, all of this innovation equally furthers the dangers of surveillance capitalism and totalitarianism, disinformation, and cyber warfare. It is becoming increasingly hard to disentangle how the techno-utopian promises and the social, political, cultural dystopias they bring about. The main reason why wondrous innovations tend to lead to oppressive applications is because of the exclusion of the marginalized peoples in the design process, the top-down approach, and disregard of the most privileged towards the ethical concerns of the ones that tend to be most harmed by such non-inclusive design deployment. For broader context, I would recommend reading the brilliant works and watching the talks by Ruha Benjamin, Sophia Noble, Sasha Constanza Chak, Ramesh Srinivasan, Kat Holmes, Sarah Hendren, Zineb Tufekci, Mary L. Gray, Siddharth Suri, Gillian C. York, Meredith Broussard, Peter Pomerantsev, among many others who have also shaped my own perspectives as futures researcher and designer. So, I'd like to invite you to reimagine what content could mean as virtual, augmented, and extended realities become, in fact, more and more real. The digital is increasingly becoming enmeshed with the physical world in such a way that our reality becomes this digital versus physical transparency mode that we choose. The advent of digital realities is an opportunity for us to rethink the way we could be experiencing information, but also disinformation. We are gradually leaving the glowing rectangular screens behind to step into computational space. And ultimately, if the immersive media technology is to succeed on large scale, it is the future of computation. As we go into this future beyond screens, we must pay attention to the context that our innovations shall be set in. We have been witnessing the loudest voices on the internet, in the media, and in politics, screaming for alienation versus communication, enclosure versus openness, fear and intimidation versus curiosity. In the light of resurgent authoritarianism and extremism, I cannot help but admit I have been somewhat troubled by how narrowly and sometimes cynically so many scientists, technologists, and media professionals have been approaching our responsibilities in terms of future ethics. Our work is never just entertainment or marketing or science or technology. We are, in fact, shaping the cultural, social, political, technological frameworks of the future. And the work that we do ultimately affects not just all humans, but all living species on this planet. More than ever before, we must think what ideologies the content we create could empower. More than ever before, we must think what behavior the technologies we develop could enable. Stanislaw Lem wrote, "There are no answers, only choices." As much as we cannot predict the future, there is never a single path to it. And if somebody tells you that, you better know they are a charlatan. What are the choices we are willing and unwilling to make that will shape the direction our collective future might take? What if instead of following the pre-existing status quo future visions, we challenge some of them? What made me fall initially for virtual and extended reality all the way back in 2013 is that it could give us that necessary distance to visualize and experience the complexities of physical reality in a new way. We have a precious opportunity to rethink how we could be interacting more profoundly with physical reality, not escaping it altogether. So an evergreen equation I pretty much use in every talk of mine is that technological innovation without humanitarian evolution always equals oppression. So I think there are some vital questions to ask. How much of the physical world do we want to change, modify, or replace with the digital? What effect all this might have on our conscious perceptions and our subconscious bias and our very psyche and physical bodies? How much of our data and privacy are willing to surrender to the providers of digital worlds, and in exchange of what? Unintended consequences of new technologies wreak havoc, sometimes more severe and widespread than we want to admit. We need to look no further than Charlie Brooker's Black Mirror, Keiichi Mitsuda's hyper-reality to see the prototypes of the future where the merger of physical and digital space goes terribly, terribly wrong. These are important cautionary tales, yes, and really digging to understand what, why, and how things could go wrong might be one of the ways to try and do it right. But also, dystopia is very tempting as product roadmap for those who are willing to cash in as the world burns. And so the urgency for a collective push to do it more right than wrong is real. Criticize how today's way to approach reality is broken, yes, but also we must attempt to prototype actually inclusive and hopeful alternative pathways. The technological progress might seem unstoppable, but none of it is inevitable or should be designed in one predetermined manner. Sometimes it is indeed vital to question the very foundations of what we call progress. It might seem that we are at the beginning of a technology that could be indistinguishable from magic, but it would only result in something actually helpful to humanity if we choose it to be so and resist the temptations of easy pathways furthering the technological innovation approach predicated on surveillance capitalism and monetization of everything. Technological dystopias and technological utopianism are not polar opposites, but rather just reverse sides of the same coin. Most utopias are indeed built top down on somebody else's dystopia. The media we create becomes us. The spaces we design inhabit us. The fictions we tell, if they're compelling at all, always bleed back into reality. Ideas have impact. How we speak matters. How we see matters. In fact, it all starts with how we see the world. Media is the modern day mythology. It lays the foundations of our civilization and becomes the ideology upon which we build our societal values and inform our policies for generations to come. In the early days, there was quite a lot of hype around the notion of VR being the ultimate empathy machine. But I believe this perspective willfully saw and presented only a fraction of the real scope of possibility of this media. No media technology has ever had as extreme a potential of both positively affecting us, yes, but also harmfully manipulating our minds as immersive media technology does. So you could say that XR, in fact, is the ultimate mind manipulation technology, for better or worse. If through the power of immersiveness, we can make you empathetic, we can do something similar and much easier with intentions to foster intolerance and hate. Current day disinformation campaigns and even aggressive state-sponsored disinformation warfare fades in comparison with what is to come once immersive media technology is the dominant media space. So I'll ask you all here, how can we remove these rose-tinted glasses and, being aware of all these very real risks, search for real strategies to counter them? What if we could stop seeing technology as this external thing to us that has desires and volitions of its own and start appreciating it as an extension of our own biology, whose well-being is not just our responsibility, but a welcome challenge? XR is a space that can only manifest its potential if we come together and work together toward a shared goal. The reason that almost a decade into the third wave of immersive media technology, there's still quite few examples of truly extraordinary content is because we are still working in disparate cultural, social, and ability disability boxes. Engineers with engineers, game people with game people, folks in the global north with folks in the global north, and teams that overwhelmingly make very effort to include neurodivergent and disabled experts, sexual and cultural minorities, etc., etc., etc. So in order to create something truly new, experience or the technology that powers it, we need to step out of our echo chambers and especially privileged insights by previously most marginalized people and groups. We are held back not as much by early stage tech, but by our fear of imagination and trying to do something radically different, and the unwillingness to have a conversation outside our immediate comfort zone, and our lack of ability to truly collaborate across artificial boundaries used to define us. So I'd like to invite y'all to open your imagination, convert it to conversations, to collaboration, creating outcomes of transformation. We have created these augmentations for ourselves for as long as we have existed. From slingshots to satellites, from eyeglasses to AR glasses, from crutches to exoskeleton suits, to replacements of our biological tissues, etc., etc., etc. We are constantly evolving how we engage and augment ourselves. AI and digital assistants and our future virtual dreaming are all part of the amazing and sometimes terrifying creative output of our species. It is up to us as a community, as it has always been, to continue to model the examples of doing good with what we create and focus on helping us all reach our potential. So here, to reposition some of the terminology and maybe offer useful replacements, I'd love to quote Audrey Tang and this brilliant poem of hers as a manifesto for a more compassionate future. She says, when we see Internet of Things, let's make it an Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And when we hear the singularity is near, let us remember plurality is here. We need more stories of plurality. We need more design processes that embody that. We need more platforms for inclusion. We need more technologies for collaboration. In fact, could we embed collaboration and plurality in the very essence of what we design? I believe not just we can, but indeed we must shift the conversation from XR being a space of isolation to XR being a space for resistance, for connection, for belonging. Instead of escaping the physical reality, we can search for new pathways to co-presence and co-creation that transcend our physical reality and center inclusivity. Because we'll have to find new ways to not just resist, but actually overcome the borders that are being imposed around us. As the angry men in ill-fitted suits want to build walls, we must build bridges. I want us to envision VR, AR, XR as the most potent medium we have ever had to facilitate understanding, learning, connecting with each other across and beyond such borders. I want to go as far as thinking we could indeed design the kind of XR that could help us make physical borders increasingly obsolete. Ultimately, what we're doing is moving from content frame to content matrix. XR is a visceral medium. We kind of allow our short-term goals to kill our long-term vision. Too often we reach for the low-hanging fruit, even while being aware that could very possibly hurt the medium long-term. Together, we can redesign future vision, and maybe by working backwards, we can be so much clearer about present responsibilities, actions, and choices. We cannot continue dragging the old media and its methodologies and our bad habits that go with it into this new media space we create. Screens had to compete with all other distractions in our physical surroundings, and we compensated for that distance with all the extra stuff that would terrify us in real life. The often disturbingly fast-paced, violent action, exaggerated visual effects. But what does it mean now that we won't be watching it anymore, but actually being in it? How much more distressing might the effect of the fast-paced, violent action and exaggerated visual effects might become? We have to shift our thinking from creating content within the frame of screens to creating the space we move through and interact with. We might need to profoundly reconsider the screen media rules and find ways to approach this new space with much greater compassion and tenderness expressed in visual and story world design, colors, shapes, and the overall user experience. Because XR experience requires trust. You don't even notice your subconscious mind until you get scared or horny. Inherited wounds are the background radiation of our lives. When we experience digital space, just like with a physical space, we bring all of our subconscious trauma that more often than not, we aren't even aware of. XR viscerally taps into all that we are, including our personal histories. It is indeed easiest and cheapest to achieve emotional reactions by triggering out fears. That's why we've been seeing so many violence and horror-based VR experiences in the early days of the medium. YouTube is full of videos of people first time in VR freaking out while being attacked by virtual zombies. Sure, that seems funny, but only until that happens to you. The experience is virtual, but the fear is very real to a point where people forget to take the headset off because they're struck in that moment. They're struck and stuck in that moment. So we will witness the very real PTSD from the virtual and augmented experiences. We will see people mentally and physically traumatized by experiences that did not really happen to their physical bodies at all. And this disproportionate amount of VR and AR have tried, cheap, claustrophobic tricks have been employed to make you move through virtual space. What I would like to do is move through space, much more driven by curiosity rather than fear. Because if the space or action within it or time is closing in on me and the only way you can motivate by threatening me, then I think that this current version of the medium suffers from a serious case of arrested development. I invite you to support the kind of media technologies that could actually feel safe and nurturing enough to help us open up rather than close us down. My creative partner, Howard Goldkrant, asks, how can we design our future as a compassionate collaborative network? All this might seem a daunting task today, I know, but if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? It's much better and easier to shape the medium in its early development stages than deal with harmful patterns as they become deeply entrenched. With the advent of immersive media, we are about to fully realize the awesome and the awesomely terrifying power of content. Content that we create could help us move past the outdated, ossified structures of the existing society and visualize the more inspiring world, or could revive the most harmful prejudice and ignorance of the centuries prior. I want you to think how the new media technology infrastructures we design could enable inclusive participatory story world. So as some of you might know, I actually work on different science fiction world design projects. And again, one of the main reasons that I fell in love with XR is because immediately I saw the potential of prototyping future realities. Reimagine our cities, reimagine urban spaces, reimagine rural spaces, reimagine our homes based on not just technological future innovation, but also social, cultural, political innovations that we so sorely need. So as through my life, I've moved from creating still images to moving images, to immersive spaces, to expansive fictional worlds. And what I've seen across all of that is not the discontinuity of the media, but a continuum of human experience. It's really about what you make me feel more than what you make. It's not as much about what you design, but what we can do in your design. It's not as much about the subject matter, but how exactly you approach it. Alicia Naples, who led the design of user experience and interaction at Magic Leap in its earliest days, says, do not make something about something. Make something that is something. The more I work in the field, the more I realize that there isn't really such thing as a grammar of extended reality. We're trying to establish compatibilities and certain rules of engagement of interaction. But the bigger question here is, how do we craft reality situations? How do we design possibility spaces? My personal number one rule for designing extended reality content, tools, platforms is a consciousness around engaging with our physical reality, observing what makes us react to physical experiences, how we move through physical space, how we interact with physical objects, paying attention to these laws of interaction, not so that we can recreate them, but also so that we can bend and open them to an even wider array of possibilities in the digital and virtual space. The most important thing ultimately to remember is that audience is not just audience anymore, and more even than a participator. The ones that are experiencing the virtual world ultimately are the co-creators of their own experience. VR, XR, AR does not exist without interaction. So now I want to say F word, techno-fetishism. For the future of this technology to be as good as we dream it to be, in a way, it has to become transparent. Bruce Sterling says, we can no longer allow ourselves to be hypnotized by the sense of technical novelty. We should all look at it like it is already passé and create it from that point of view. It must be good without us considering that it is new. If an experience is only good because it is new, it won't be good for long. We do not really have a technology problem. Accuracy is not the only measure of quality. In volumetric XR space, most seem to be pursuing the pixel-perfect recreation of reality. That is something that we sometimes need, but is not the only thing that we need, and certainly not when we need the most. The simulation of our physical reality will never be as good as a real thing. It is much more fruitful to focus our attention in imagining and designing experiences that augment the real world or allow to experience aspects of it inaccessible with a naked eye. I think the work of Marshmallow Laser Feast illustrates wonderfully such approach. The MLF Collective's immersive experiences explore ecosystem complexity and interconnectedness and allow us to see the invisible layer of it in such a way that gives us back a true sense of wonder and awe and a real desire to understand and engage more with the living world around us. So it is really vital that more time, energy, and resources go to the R&D of content. Because XR is not hardware, XR is not platforms, XR is experiences. XR is digital spaces that you step out of with physical memories. XR is a journey leading ultimately into experiencing our own inner space. I also really want to speak about the indigenous roots of XR as a human experience. So XR is not new. In a way, it is simply a technology that can finally begin to echo the altered, augmented, expanded states that the indigenous spiritual practices since time immemorial have brought humans into through their sacred rituals. Rituals that, since the inception, have had a goal of teaching us how to dive deeper into the parts of our psyche unknown to our conscious minds, so that we could learn how to come closer to the world that we are inextricably linked with. I know this might sound somewhat esoteric, but that's what being in the space, while knowing that that space is not there very much is. It is literally an out-of-body experience. More than ever before, creation, be artistic, scientific, or technological, needs to have some of that deeper and also more humble and more informed approach towards our subconscious. I dream of social technology tools that can help us heal our wounds as individuals, as cultures, as societies, as a species amongst species living in a tangled web of life on this planet. The greatest innovations open new avenues for our perception of the world and our very role within it, and heighten our sense of responsibility and reciprocity towards it all. Our technology should not just be about solving practical problems to increase material productivity, consequences on us and the planet be damned. Creativity is not just about devising smarter ways of selling more things people do not need. Creativity is about creating moments of meaningful experience that expands the human potential, intellectually and physically, yes, but also creatively and emotionally. What we need is not more technology-driven experiences, centering the wants of the few, but the experience-driven technology that inclusively serves the needs of the many. We need technology that can take us further, beyond these physical bodies, not to escape or replace them, but so that we can bring back the digital possibility space into our physical lives. Now is the future. Future is always now, every day, with every single thing that we do. We create the culture of the future that we and everyone else will be inhabiting. Our actions matter, but so does our inaction and our apathy. If we think the future happens somewhere else and is designed by somebody else, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I can leave you with only one question, what is the future reality that you want to participate in creating? And what are you doing about that today? Thank you so much. I hope to see y'all more on the virtual space. Bye.